When Dr. Christopher Morris impulsively accepted an invitation to dinner with the new janitor, he had no idea of the whirlwind of emotions that awaited him. Polite, kind, and mysterious, Alexander Mitchell seemed to be hiding something behind his simple uniform and easy smile. But nothing could have prepared Christopher for what would happen that night. Christopher closed his car door and adjusted the stethoscope around his neck as he walked toward Magnolia Gardens nursing home in the quiet outskirts of Boston. The modest brick building with its large windows and well-kept garden stood in stark contrast to Massachusetts General Hospital, where he spent most of his week. There, in that simple place, maintained by donations and a small municipal grant, he found the true meaning of medicine. The aroma of coffee and toast still lingered in the air as Christopher walked down the hallway to his improvised office. Several nurses greeted him warmly. Mrs. Rodriguez, the Puerto Rican head nurse with salt and pepper hair, handed him a clipboard with the day's list of patients. "Good morning, Dara. Mr. Walter is eager to show you photos from the veterans meeting last weekend," said Rodriguez, adjusting her glasses. "And how is Mr. Sullivan still complaining about his medication?" Christopher asked with a knowing smile. So focused on organizing his materials, Christopher didn't notice the hurried footsteps until the door burst open with a crash as buckets and mops scattered across the floor. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know someone was here." A tall man with sandy brown hair and broad shoulders apologized while trying to balance the cleaning supplies that hadn't fallen. He wore a simple gray uniform with the nursing home's name embroidered on the pocket. "I'm looking for the dormitories to start cleaning. It's my first day, and I'm a bit lost," he explained with an embarrassed smile that formed small wrinkles around striking blue eyes. While helping pick up the fallen supplies, Christopher noticed an unusual detail on the janitor's wrist, a Rolex watch that would cost several months of a janitor's salary. Just last month, he had extensively researched luxury watches for his father's birthday gift. Their conversation flowed easily as Alex mentioned his appreciation for James Baldwin's works in vintage jazz records, cultural references that seemed incongruent with his current position. Something about this janitor didn't quite add up, but Christopher had patience waiting. Throughout the day, Christopher found his thoughts drifting back to the mysterious janitor with educated taste in an inexplicably expensive watch. What secrets was Alexander Mitchell hiding behind those captivating blue eyes? And why did Christopher feel so drawn to him, despite professional boundaries and his own carefully guarded personal life? Friends, if you enjoy stories that warm your heart and challenge your assumptions, hit subscribe and join our growing family of storytellers and dreamers. Let me know in the comments what you think of Christopher and Alex's first meeting, and prepare yourself for what happens next. Lunchtime at Magnolia Gardens quickly became Christopher's favorite part of his volunteer days. He entered the modest cafeteria to find Alex sitting alone, his shoulders slightly hunched as he read a dog-eared copy of Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. Christopher hesitated before approaching, conscious of curious glances from staff members. "Mind if I join you?" Christopher asked, placing his tray opposite Alex, who looked up with a warm smile that made his blue eyes crinkle at the corners. Their conversation flowed from literature to music to the challenges of healthcare in America. Alex spoke with surprising insight about insurance policy gaps, using terminology no ordinary janitor would know. Christopher found himself sharing frustrations about Massachusetts General, how corporate interests increasingly dictated patient care, and the research opportunity at Harvard that demanded discretion about his personal life. "They didn't explicitly say to hide who I am," Christopher explained, lowering his voice. "But the principal investigator made comments about team fit and conservative donors when he saw the small rainbow pin on my bag." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Integrity shouldn't come with an asterisk. Your brilliance as a cardiologist exists independently of who you love." The statement hung between them, charged with unspoken understanding. Each Tuesday and Thursday, they gravitated toward each other. Christopher learned that Alex possessed gentle patience with residents, particularly with Walter Williams, a 78-year-old veteran whose hands trembled from Parkinson's. "My grandfather had Parkinson's," Alex explained as they watched Walter shuffle through the garden. He taught me that dignity matters more than efficiency. Not everyone appreciated their growing friendship. Head nurse Richard Ian, with her perpetually pinched expression, made pointed comments about maintaining professional relationships and knowing your place. Her thinly veiled prejudice became apparent when she assigned Alex to clean the bathrooms whenever Christopher arrived. Pride Festival is this weekend, Walter mentioned one afternoon as Christopher checked his heart rhythm. First one I'll attend since my Harold passed. You going, Doc? Christopher tensed, glancing toward the hallway. I'm not sure. Work commitments. Took me until my 70s to walk openly, Walter said, patting Christopher's hand. Don't waste decades like I did. Later that week, Alex approached Christopher as he prepared to leave. I know this is forward, he began, nervously running a hand through his hair. But would you have dinner with me Saturday? There's a restaurant called Top of the Hub, with a view of the entire city. Christopher's eyes widened. That's one of the most expensive restaurants in Boston. Don't worry about the cost, Alex replied with an enigmatic smile. I'd just like one evening where we're not surrounded by cleaning supplies and medical charts. That Saturday, Christopher stood before his bedroom mirror, adjusting his tie, heart pounding with anticipation and questions. How could a janitor afford Top of the Hub? What was he walking into? And why? Despite all these red flags, did he feel so irresistibly drawn to Alexander Mitchell? Life sometimes offers profound lessons through unexpected teachers. Christopher was about to discover that appearances rarely tell the complete story, and that courage comes in many forms, from standing up against injustice to allowing yourself to be truly seen. Even when society has taught you to remain hidden, Boston's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the night sky as Christopher arrived at the rooftop restaurant. His breath caught at the sight of Alex waiting by the entrance. Gone was the modest janitor in gray uniform. In his place stood a striking figure in a perfectly tailored navy Armani suit, his sandy hair neatly styled, his posture exuding quiet confidence. You look amazing, Alex said softly, placing a gentle kiss on Christopher's cheek. The maitre d' greeted Alex by name, leading them to a secluded table overlooking the twinkling city lights. Christopher watched with increasing bewilderment as Alex conversed fluently with the sommelier about vintage years and vineyard regions, recommended dishes with the familiarity of a regular patron, and handled the fine crystal and silverware with practiced elegance. How do you know this place so well? Christopher finally asked after their appetizers arrived. The question had been burning inside him all evening. Alex smiled enigmatically. Let's just say I've frequented places like this in another life. The night progressed beautifully. The wine was exceptional. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and Christopher found himself laughing more genuinely than he had in months. There was a natural connection between them, as if they were old souls reunited. While they waited for dessert, Alex was recounting childhood summers in Michigan when commotion erupted across the restaurant. A woman stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. Please, someone help. I think it's his heart. Oh, she cried desperately. Christopher instinctively rose, but before he could move, Alex was already striding toward the couple's table. I'm a doctor, he announced in an authoritative voice Christopher had never heard from him before. Please step back and give him space. Frozen in disbelief, Christopher watched as Alex loosened the elderly man's tie, checked vital signs, and immediately began chest compressions with perfect technique. His movements were precise, confident, unmistakably those of a trained cardiologist. Has anyone called an ambulance? Alex called out without pausing compressions. And we need the AED from behind the bar, now. The manager rushed to retrieve the emergency equipment while Alex continued CPR with textbook precision. Christopher finally broke free from his stupor and approached, identifying himself as a doctor. Together, they worked in perfect sync until paramedics arrived minutes later. By then, the man had regained consciousness and was breathing independently. Alex provided the EMTs with detailed medical information using terminology only a specialized physician would know. After the ambulance departed, The restaurant erupted in appreciative applause. Alex acknowledged it with a modest nod before returning to their table where Christopher waited, utterly perplexed. "I believe I owe you an explanation," Alex said quietly, running a hand through his now disheveled hair. "You're not a janitor," Christopher replied, arms crossed defensively. "You're a doctor, a cardiologist specifically. Why the charade?" Alex took a deep breath, his blue eyes meeting Christopher's directly. "I was chief of cardiology at Mayo Clinic until 6 months ago. Then I punched hospital director Whitman, son of State Senator Whitman, and my life imploded." "You assaulted your boss, Ikobe?" Christopher asked, struggling to reconcile the gentleman before him with such violence. A homeless man came in with clear signs of myocardial infarction. Whitman ordered us to transfer him to County Hospital, a death sentence given his condition. Alex's voice grew strained. "When I insisted on treating him, Whitman made a comment about not wasting resources on street garbage. I lost control." Alex paused, his expression darkening. 3 years ago, my boyfriend Marcus was turned away from an emergency room because the doctor wasn't comfortable treating him. He died before reaching another hospital. I swore I'd never let prejudice determine who deserves care. "The patient survived," Alex continued softly. "I performed the procedure anyway, but Whitman pressed charges and the medical board suspended my license for 6 months. Community service was part of my sentence." Truth sometimes arrives like thunder after lightning, illuminating everything that was previously shrouded in darkness. Christopher suddenly understood the expensive watch, the sophisticated knowledge testing, the confidence in luxury settings. The janitor was a disguise. The doctor was real. The restaurant gradually emptied around them as Christopher processed Alex's revelation. Candlelight flickered across their faces, creating shadows that seemed to dance with the weight of their conversation. "There's more," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't just punch Whitman. I discovered he was receiving kickbacks from insurance companies for denying care to high-risk patients. When I threatened to expose him, he made sure my suspension was as public and humiliating as possible." Christopher reached across the table, taking Alex's hand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "How exactly does that conversation start?" Alex smiled ruefully. "By the way, I'm not really a janitor. I'm a disgraced cardiologist who assaulted a senator's son. I wanted you to know me first, not my reputation or my mistakes." They stayed until the staff began turning chairs onto tables, walking along the moonlit Boston Harbor afterward. Alex shared his journey, growing up in Detroit with factory worker parents, earning scholarships through determination, serving as a medic in Afghanistan before medical school. Each revelation painted a more complex portrait of the man Christopher had assumed was simply a janitor with expensive taste. "Why did you invite me here tonight?" Christopher asked as they stood watching boats gently rock in the marina. "And why this place?" Alex turned to face him fully. "Because watching you at Magnolia Gardens, I saw a physician practicing medicine the way it should be, with genuine compassion and without distinction between rich and poor. You reminded me why I became a doctor." He paused, a hint of vulnerability crossing his features. "And I chose this place because, selfishly, I wanted one night where you saw me as I was before everything fell apart." The following weeks unfolded like chapters in a novel neither had expected to write. Alex introduced Christopher to his grandmother, a fierce woman with silver hair and bright eyes who had marched at Stonewall and still attended every Pride parade. Christopher nervously brought Alex to Sunday dinner with his traditional New England family, where his mother embraced them warmly while his father maintained a polite but distant cordiality. At Magnolia Gardens, they continued their respective roles publicly, though Elena Rodriguez had figured out their connection and became a protective ally, rearranging schedules to give them moments of privacy. Walter noticed too, sharing stories of his decades with Harold, once whispering to Christopher, "Don't waste time worrying what others think. Love is too precious." Then came the decision Christopher had dreaded. Harvard called with a formal research offer, prestigious, career-defining, and accompanied by subtle expectations about his personal discretion. The same day, Alex mentioned plans to open a community clinic once his suspension ended, serving those marginalized by the healthcare system. "What will you choose?" Alex asked one evening as they walked through Boston Common, fall leaves crunching beneath their feet. Christopher stopped, watching families and couples enjoying the early evening. "My whole career I've been working toward opportunities like Harvard. It's what ambitious doctors dream about." "But," Alex prompted gently, "but I keep thinking about what you did, standing up for that patient even knowing the consequences. I've spent years carefully calibrating my professional image, hiding parts of myself to fit expectations. What if that's not success at all?" The annual Boston Pride Parade arrived on a perfect June morning. Christopher stood nervously on the crowded sidewalk, watching colorful floats pass by. His Harvard colleagues might see him, hospital administrators too. Years of careful professional boundaries could dissolve in an instant. Then he felt warm fingers intertwine with his. Alex stood beside him, eyes asking a silent question. With a deep breath, Christopher stepped off the curb, joining the parade hand in hand with the man he'd come to love. Sometimes the most profound growth comes from difficult choices. Christopher was discovering that authenticity, living aligned with your deepest values rather than external expectations, might be the most sophisticated form of success. And sometimes the people who challenge us most profoundly are exactly those we need to meet. Winter had transformed Boston into a snow-covered postcard when news broke that rocked the medical community. The Boston Globe published an extensive investigation into corruption at several prestigious hospitals, prominently featuring Director Whitman's insurance kickback scheme. Front-page photos showed him being escorted from his office by federal agents. 2 weeks later, Alex received an official letter from the medical board. Christopher sat beside him as he opened it with trembling fingers. "Full reinstatement," Alex whispered, looking up with eyes bright with unshed tears. "Effective immediately." Job offers flooded in from hospitals nationwide, each promising prestigious positions and substantial salaries. Alex declined them all. Instead, he and Christopher secured a modest storefront in a diverse neighborhood where healthcare access had always been limited. Heartfelt Care opened its doors on a crisp spring morning. The modest clinic's mission statement, framed near the entrance, read, "Quality healthcare with dignity for all, regardless of circumstance." Elena Rodriguez joined their team as nursing director, bringing her warmth and efficiency to their growing practice. They continued volunteering at Magnolia Gardens. Walter became their unofficial advisor. His lifetime of experiencing prejudice and eventually acceptance, providing perspective they valued deeply. Even Nurse Richardson softened over time, particularly after Heartfelt Care treated her nephew, a young gay man whose previous doctors had dismissed his symptoms. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Christopher found Alex in the small office at Magnolia Gardens, where buckets had once scattered across the floor. "Remember this room?" Christopher asked, leaning against the doorframe. Alex looked up from checking a residence chart, his face breaking into that familiar smile that still made Christopher's heart skip. "How could I forget best mess I ever made?" "Harvard called again yesterday," Christopher said casually, sitting beside him, "offering to double the research funding if I'll reconsider." "And," Alex asked, setting down his pen, "I told them I'm exactly where I need to be." Christopher reached for Alex's hand, fingers brushing over the simple band he'd placed there months earlier. "Between you and Heartfelt Care and our work here, I've found something Harvard can't offer." Outside the window, residents enjoyed the garden's first spring blooms. Walter sat with his photo album open, showing pictures of Harold to anyone who would listen. Mrs. Sullivan complained less vigorously about her medication schedule. Life continued its imperfect, beautiful rhythm. "You know," Alex said thoughtfully, "a year ago I was mopping floors and wondering if my medical career was over forever. Now look at us." They watched the scene outside, hands intertwined, knowing they had found not only each other, but also the true meaning of their vocation. Medicine practiced with integrity, compassion that recognized no boundaries, and the courage to stand for what's right even when it comes at personal cost. Dear friends, What would you risk for your principles? And have you ever found unexpected love or purpose in the most surprising circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments below, reminding you that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with spilled buckets and mistaken identities. If you enjoyed Christopher and Alex's story, please subscribe to our channel for more tales that open hearts and minds. Until next time, remember that authenticity may be life's greatest achievement.